All right, everybody. We are here again, our little cohort, Tony, Zerbin, Kayla Shackleton, and Jaryn Weir. And we are talking about the motion of emotion. So, Tony, maybe you can start us off, and then the three of us will chime in as we chime.
Sure, totally. So a concept that I talk about with clients very often and very early is this idea that our emotions, the way I like breaking it down, taking the actual word, I like saying that they're emotions, that they're energy for motion. So this is really trying to get down into our physiology, our biochemistry, and saying, what is the point? Why do we as physical beings actually have this experience called emotion? And one of the most helpful ways I found of looking at it is that these emotions move us. They give us energy to move in very particular ways. They're our nervous system's first response, first interpretation of reality. So we can look at some of them. I like to keep it a list short, about 7 emotions in total. But we can look at things like fear, for example, right? Fear is not good. Fear is not bad, but it's useful because it's an emotion that gives us energy to move, particularly away from dangers, right? So, for example, the difference between fear and anxiety is anxiety doesn't really have a particular source. Fear hones us in. It says, danger's there. I'm running that way. I see the danger there. It's specific. It's as concrete as it can be. And this is the action that I'm going to take in response. So fear gives us the energy to run, which is great, right? That's different than a thought. Thoughts take too long. Fear gets us moving before we even identify what it is that we're afraid of. And that can be the difference between life and death, right? In our complex urban life, well, we don't have a lot of bears and wolves to run from, but fear still gives us a sense of there's danger. I need energy to respond, right? Anger works much the same way too. I like distilling it down like this. When you rip off all the ethics on top and all the morality on top and you get down to the base experience of it, anger, very simply, is energy for action, right? It's a sense that something is not right in my reality. Somebody's either being dangerous or being rude, or somebody is at risk. Maybe you're taking care of somebody who doesn't know the hazards of the job, and we get angry, right? My parents getting angry with kids even, right? It's like, don't do that, right? It's high energy, it's very specific, and it's trying to respond to reality in front of you. So anger, again, something we might otherwise call a negative emotion, is actually just a useful emotion. It's not good, it's not bad, but it's energy for emotion that moves us to take care of our kids, to stop somebody from bullying us, to stop somebody from hurting us, to confront a partner when they're being dense and solid and just not paying attention. If we don't have anger, we can get really hurt. If we don't have fear, we can get really hurt. So the emotions that we experience, they give us energy to respond to reality in a way to keep us and the people we care about safe. That's really one of the big things I've explained to clients about it. Because, man, if we demonize our own emotions, if we call them negative, that's part of our experience. We're trying to cut ourselves a part of ourselves out. So I don't know. This is what I like giving to clients. What are your thoughts about this?
I love this conversation, Tony. It seems super timely with what we were just kind of discussing a little bit. Often we identify emotions as being bad or good, and that is really difficult to help move past that perspective, because it isn't that it's a good or bad emotion. They're useful, and there is effectiveness for all those emotions, and why we respond the way that we do, there is a purpose behind it. So I'm digging into this conversation.
Totally. I mean, take anger. We'll come back to anger for a sec, right? I know you work a lot with kids, right? If we say anger is not good, it's a negative emotion, suddenly it's like, well, what do I do with all this energy that I've got? There's times where we use anger and we do things that are not good, that need to be disciplined, absolutely. But that energy is there for a reason. And then the question can be, okay, anger is not bad, the energy is not bad. What we do with it can be. So maybe we can have a conversation about what's a more appropriate way to use the energy.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's these cute books we have here at Sojourn called the Elf Help Books for Kids, and the one called Mad Isn't Bad. There's this part where the little elf guy says, anger, it can be useful like fire if you use it to cook food or keep yourself warm. But if it is unchecked, it doesn't say that in the children's book. But if it's not taken care of, it can also be dangerous, like forest fire. And so there's this like the motion, the energy, and the meaning that we make from that. So there's like this. I'm thinking about two things. There's a pre-meaning, like some sort of subconscious belief about
impulse, almost even.
Something happens in my life, what I subconsciously see as fearful. Yeah. And then I have my more dominant or well-tracked emotion, which is fear, anger, anxiety. And so if I'm more well-tracked with anxiety and I get this subconscious signal, I go anxious. I get this subconscious signal, my meaning down here, and I go angry. The more I go angry, the more meaning I make about anger. The more I go anxious, the more meaning I make about anxiety.
Totally.
Putting it out there.
I love it. I mean, it reminds me too that like the different layers of it. Sometimes we work with clients that have anger, that have really angry thoughts, and it feels really stuck. And sometimes then the question can be, well, what does your anger want you to do? How does your anger want you to move? And that's another way of looking at the emotion away from the thoughts that might help us get on a different track, right? Or if something like sadness has been suppressed for a really long time, it's never been allowed, it's been threatened, it's been shamed, right? I'll give you something to cry about, don't you cry. Our clan doesn't cry about things. Like a lot of the messages that we internalize that cut off our own sadness. Sometimes it's just getting a moment to pause and say, okay, if I think I might be sad right now, what kind of movement do I need to do? And maybe that's a way of getting a bit more in connection with the experience of sadness.
Beautiful.
Yeah, something I've just been thinking about is like a lot of times people don't necessarily want to feel their emotions because maybe they feel like it will be out of control or it's too much or too overwhelming. But what you're saying, Tony, is like our emotions actually inform us of what's going on in our world, and they can, in a way, be like a protective mechanism for what we're encountering.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And then people will say, I'm not emotional. And it's like, why do we want to believe we're not emotional? Is there's some sort of concern for what might feel like a big feeling. We've talked about big feelings. And so then if I think this is a big feeling, then I have beliefs about myself when this big feeling shows up. But your question there, Tony, that's such a powerful question that I'm going to add into my vault of questions is how does anger want you to move? How does this emotion want me to move? And right now, anger might want me to move into a FU position.
Yeah.
A criticism. I like, oh, look at blame. But the more I step into how does anger want to move, the better I can get at understanding how anger actually wants me to move, which might be like, wow, I don't like how I feel in this relationship. I want to take a breather. Or how do I want to move with sad? How does sad want me to move? How does joy want me to move? Beautiful question.
You know, it highlights something else that's really interesting too. This is a random piece that had no context from my undergrad. When we were learning a little bit about how psychology, spent a lot of time learning how the brain works by looking at people who have damage in parts of their brains and saying, oh, what's not working anymore? Well, there's this guy that went in for a study. I think this was HM. He's a really classic example, or it might have been a different guy, but he was having some kind of issue with, I think, seizures, and they wanted to take out his amygdala. Just this little part of your brain that's right behind your eyeballs that's largely responsible for us experiencing fear as well as other emotions. So they went through the operation and they were doing some talking with him after the fact, and they said, so just going to run through some questions with you. How you doing? And he checked out great. on all the questions. He was conscious, coherent, he was able to speak, he was able to hold a conversation. It looked by all accounts to be a wildly successful operation. So they're like, okay, phew, big breath of relief, because tinkering around with the machinery is never, there's always things that can happen. Everything checked out fine until they got to the point about making a decision around when to book the follow-up session. And this is what happened. So he had a bit of spare time, and his doctor looked at him and said, okay, let's book our next session. It's going to be, we'll say, I'm paraphrasing it, but it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, sometime between 12 and 4. What do you want to do to your patient? And he sat there and he thought about it. And then they talked for another half an hour to 45 minutes straight, weighing out the pros and cons of all of the different options. It was an incredibly logical, incredibly coherent conversation, but the oomph needed to actually make a choice about a specific time wasn't connecting, right? So when we talk about ourselves being logical, rational human beings that are, really controlling and these kinds of things, we need our emotion to move us as part of our system of processing reality.
Yeah, when they removed his emotion center, he didn't have emotion.
Exactly. He couldn't follow emotion, right? About something as arbitrary as like, what do I want to order off the menu, or when do I want to make my appointment? When we suffer, and we don't need brain injuries to have this challenge, but when we suffer from not really being in connection with our emotions, things like decision making become a lot more difficult because we don't know how to move. We feel stuck.
Interesting. And then it's this, the subconscious world as well that is so relevant, because we have to face so many choices. So we get into some automatic responses. The feeling shows up, and then I think this is what I do because I'm angry. Because I have to decide on so many things all day. I know this is angry, and this is what I do. I F you to somebody. Say it. Whatever. But I don't do that. I don't say that to many people. Some maybe, but the more I can slow down and say, what does this emotion want? How does this emotion want to move? Because our emotions are meant to cause motion.
Yeah.
And choice, I guess. That's what I'd never made that connection before. Totally. Motion, energy, and choice.
Yeah. It's everything that our rational thought life rests on top of.
Yeah.
It's our ability to move. So when clients are talking about feeling stuck or unable to make decisions, or at gridlock in relationships, you can have this kind of conversation. It's like, well, let's take a peek underneath. What's going on with the emotions? Where are they getting stuck? What are the movements? I think it was Virginia Satir. She had these really powerful reenactments that she would do with couples and say, okay, she'd listen to them talk.
Yeah.
They'd go through it, and then she'd pause and say, okay, I'm going to stand you up. I'm going to pose you into what I'm seeing, the physical interaction underneath the conversation. And when people moved into those postures, kind of out there, right? But when they moved into those postures, it amplified everything that was going on. And they're like, oh, shoot, this is our pattern. This is why it feels so awful, and I can see it now. It's so awful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Satir's no joke. Satir's no joke. She's got good stuff. She doesn't get notice as much as she should. She's got good stuff. Interesting. What do you think, Jaryn or Kayla? What do you think? Lots to think. Lots to feel right now.
Yeah, I think even lots of emotions. I think even just energy for emotion. And so I think there's this idea too that like our emotions are constantly in motion, and so we don't have to be in anger or fear or sadness. It's not a constant place. It may feel that way, but they're constantly flowing, right? And so how do we like continue to move through it, right? And what kind of support do we need as we're moving through those emotions?
That's so important.
No, absolutely. That's the key. If we can respond to them well enough, it's a wave, it comes and it goes. Yeah, totally.
About it too is thinking about the interconnection between the different emotions. So by being able to have that awareness that it is motion helps you peel back those layers to see, okay, where is this awareness? Let's peel this apart. Let's look at this a bit further. Yeah, you might be really angry, but it could be more than just anger. It might be something else going on, and it just helps to create more of an awareness piece too.
Oh yeah, oh that's huge, right?
With the idea of the waves, which is a dialectical behavior metaphor that we ride our emotions like waves on the ocean, right? So I ride this wave trusting that it will crash on the shore eventually. But even with talking about emotion or the energy of emotion, often what we want to do with our feelings is it's like, I don't like this wave, I'm going to try and build it down. And so we dam it, but then as Freud would say, there's all this stuff stuck, and eventually anger comes out some way.
Yeah.
Or the emotion that we're trying to block is going to come out some way. And that's where if you remove the block, there's like a whole tsunami of whatever we're trying to stack. Yeah. I don't know how to trust myself to let this feeling move. And so then I try to block it, and then it does something. Then I am going around saying F you to people, which is going to cause me a lot of troubles. The other thing is like what makes the beach beautiful? The waves.
Yes.
You know, so if you go to the beach and there's a bunch of dams up, like, why are you going to go to the beach? You can't see anything.
This is, oh my goodness. So this reminds me of something. In the work that I do, the somatic training I do, some of the people I train alongside are actually massage therapists. And when we talk about dams and holding back emotions, I've had some fun. I asked them, I say, when you're working with clients, are there particular muscles that you're working with that you can count on? That if you release it, if you move it, stuff's going to come up? And without fail, they all look at me and say, shoulders, area around the ribs, like, yeah, one of those tight muscles in there. When those muscles are really tight and we release them, it's like a floodgate opens for some clients. And then the massage therapist for a moment turns into a bit of like a bartender therapist, right? And it's like, well, what do I do with this? Because I'm working with muscles and now emotions are around. Yeah. But that's like, this is how we dam up our emotions in our body, is we can carry them in our jaw, in our shoulders. This is how we try to hold back all that motion that's looking for a way to move. So that's the edge of my scope. At some point I say, well, this is good, but you might want to see a massage therapist too.
Everybody should see a massage therapist. What do you think, Jaryn or Kayla? I have so many thoughts on what we're talking about, but I'm not sure if either one of you want to just chime in with some more thinking.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, that is very common. I've heard that lots where, you know, someone goes to see a massage therapist and they end up being really emotional afterwards, and they're just kind of like, where is this all coming from? You know, I just had like a really relaxing massage, and so why am I emotional all of a sudden? And I think it's just, yeah, it's releasing all of that emotion built up in certain parts of our body, and it's finally allowing it to like move, right? Yeah.
I mean, to kind of split a hair here a little bit, there is a difference between releasing an emotion and addressing an emotion, right? So it used to be really popular early in psychology to do something called catharsis, which is just get it all out, right? Sometimes that reinforces the emotion without actually addressing it. But if we can become aware of what emotion is there, then that is something we can bring back into therapy and say, okay, this came out. It surprised me. What the heck? Can we work through that a bit? So there can be that kind of interplay. But just because an emotion comes out doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually meeting the emotion.
Well, or am I challenging the meaning that I've made? Ultimately, this is the risk with the limit of psychology, is if we don't address the subconscious shift.
Yeah.
It can't all be behavioral. It can't all be on the surface. It's like, if I can hold space to say, I talk about my anger so that I can hear it, so that I can say, oh, I don't like that I do that with anger, so that I can create new meaning around anger.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we start to believe anger is not bad, but most of us have a hard time dealing with it. It's probably, well, I think it's the most common emotion that's hard to deal with. Anger, disgust is kind of a gross one too.
Shame.
Yeah.
Yeah, the unmentionable one.
The unmentionable, the one we shall not name.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is awesome. The other thing that I was thinking about when I knew we were going to talk about emotion and motion of emotion, was the idea that I like Daniel Amen. I like neuropsychologists. They're get things better than I do. But one thing that Amen strongly advocates for is exercise and cardio. It's a fast way to cool down a hot brain. The two fastest ways to cool down a hot brain would be, cardio, but any sort of exercise, dance, turn on YouTube, have a dance party, and tears, which is interesting. Motions, moving, let's get the energy out. And then working with kids, what's powerful for work forward with adults is kids, we have so much more license to like figure out a physical expression with the emotion. You're angry, what do you want to do with the anger? I want to like roll it up like a ball and kick it out the door. Sounds awesome, let's do it. But how many grown-ups need to kick a soccer ball of anger out the door, but they don't know how to allow themselves to do it?
Oh man, right.
The ball's gonna come back though.
I mean, a big piece of it with exercise, with those exercises with kids, like physical exercise or these playful exercises, is you get a sense of how do you feel before you do the motion, and then how do you feel after you do the motion, right? How does it feel to kick the anger away? Oh man, that's actually really good. Like I feel like I'm relaxing. Like I don't have to carry as much tension. It's a break. It's a relief. It's a release, right? Our language betrays us. Our emotions live in our body. And our language just, I mean, if you take a close look at it, so much of the way we talk about emotion is so embodied.
So embodied. And just like we live in our homes, we don't just stay in our home. So there's that again, it's such a healthy view of like our emotions live in our body. They need to move out and come back, move out and come back.
Yeah.
That's metaphorical, not science. That's not science, that's metaphor. Kayla, were you going to say something?
Well, I was just thinking about how, because emotions we're getting at the point that it is motion. So also how important it is for each individual to have their own experience as to what that emotion looks like, and things that are tangible that help support them to get that motion out. Like what that looks like for me could look very different than what it looks like for somebody else. So I guess challenging that idea that has kind of been created, that good emotion, bad emotion, and just honoring where you're at too is really essential.
That's so important. Yeah, that uniqueness. And on one of our previous vlogs, Lisa Rowbottom was talking about mental health and like how unique diagnoses can look, because the makeup, the checklist for each one, it's so unique to each person. But then our own experience, every person, you might feel similar, people's energy feels a bit similar, but each person is so unique. So as much as John and Jane may be very, very similar in how I view them, John may see his anger as blue and Jane may see her anger as red. And that is a powerful difference to get really explicit in their unique view of self. and how they experience then that emotion. And what does their anger, how does their anger want to move? Yeah, or their feeling.
Totally.
Awesome. Okay, anything else sort of on your minds, thoughts for questions for each other, or just sort of little epiphanies or tools that you're reminded of?
I think really just on that last point, it's so lovely because we can go looking for definitions of anger or fear or sadness. And when I work with clients, I really want to take Kayla's point and say, okay, and your point too, Tara, is what does anger look like for you? And how does it want you to move right now? How does it want you to move in relationship to what just happened? Because anger might show up one way today for you, and it might show up another way tomorrow. I'm very careful about what I try to tell clients anger might look like. I'll say, okay, this is kind of my experience of it. How much of this connects with you? How much doesn't? Because you have your own way of moving with anger. And I don't want to take that from you or tell you what it should look like. But can we make it more clear and concrete?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome, you guys. This was fun. Nice to be challenged on this and learn from each other. Learn a little bit more from Tony and just sort of reframing our experience or our understanding of emotion is so inspiring, and that's why it's lovely to have these